Grace and peace, and spoiler alert for the movie Tenet. My name's Ryan, and I am the movie pastor. I watch movies, and I interpret them theologically. And this is all thanks to my movie pass, so it's a clever pun. Speaking of clever puns, I went and watched the movie Tenet, and when I went, I was fully expecting that I would be talking about and exegeting a new text that had interesting things to say about this really interesting ancient symbol called the satyr square. This is a square made up of mostly nonsense words and a couple words from real Latin that's a deep palindrome. So it works not only the same way backwards and forwards, but also upwards and downwards and upside down. And it's kind of cool. It also became an ancient Christian symbol because if you rearrange the letters just right, it spells Pater Noster, which means our Father. And within the previews, it seemed very clear that this movie was inspired by that. The spelling of Tenet, which I realized too late is not the same as the spelling of tenant. Anyway, brain fart on my part, indicated we were going to be dealing with this kind of cool symbol that some people think is kind of mystical, and no. I mean, the movie dropped like Easter eggs about the satyr square, but it didn't do anything with it. And instead of doing things with the satyr square, what we got was a movie that was about time travel, moving backwards and forwards in time, and especially the significance of what it is to communicate with the future, which is something that the movie recognizes we all do. Every one of us at one time, at many times in our lives, communicates with the future. Anytime we write something down or leave a message, the person we're expecting to receive it is a future person, not a present person. And sometimes we even communicate with the distant future, doing things like burying time capsules. But that can result in interesting problems, especially if and when the future is able to communicate back, as it is in this film. That there are certain ways, albeit small ways, for things from the future to become inverted and start moving backwards in time. And what significance would that have? What would it mean if something from the future could impact us in the present? Well, they explore that. And they explore it in some significant ways in the film. I mean, they get pretty philosophically heady about it. In fact, if the film has a serious weakness, I think it's that it gets too heady to really be comprehended. And while we're still getting used to like how time travel works in this universe, the universe is already used to it, and it's just doing more complex things independent of the audience. But they start asking questions, you know, hey, we're trying to prevent reality itself from unraveling. In the future, we're gonna do that, right? Like in the third act of this film, we're here. Does that mean we succeeded?
This reversing the flow of time doesn't us being here now mean it never happened.
And hey, by the way, if we succeeded, if we know how it ends, then what's to stop us from like not doing anything? Because apparently whatever we do in the present is the right thing, so let's just do whatever we want. Those kind of questions are serious and they have import. And the answers to those questions, in a lot of ways, are just as kind of nonchalant and hand-wavy as they get to be in the movie, right? You have Ron Pattinson at the end being like, I call it reality. Like, why do we keep fighting for the future that we have?
That part is a little dramatic.
Why do we keep fighting for the future that we have succeeded in saving? Well, because we can't do nothing. Why do we keep fighting for the future that we know we're going to succeed in? Because we need to succeed. Our success isn't a reason to do nothing, and knowing the ending isn't a reason not to participate in the ride, in the story, and engage in what's going on. So, what's that have to do with theology? Well, it reminds me of engaging with the prophets. And I almost regret saying that. I almost don't want to go like, oh yeah, time travel, prophets, because prophets don't tell the future. That's not what prophets are for. Prophets speak God's word to God's people about present realities that have import on the future. And that's exactly what Tenet is really about. Skip the device that sends you back and inverts you. Prophets aren't doing that part. But prophets write things down. They speak things aloud. They communicate with the future. They communicate with us who are in their future about things that for them were yet to come, and for us are a part of, oftentimes, our present reality or even our past. So they will say things like, God redeems, God saves, God is faithful to God's people, and that means God will send a redeemer. God has promised that the line of David would remain forever. So someone is coming from the line of David. We know that's true. And they do an interesting thing in Hebrew. If you read the texts that way, very often the statements about the future, God will send a redeemer, are actually written in almost the past tense. I call it the prophetic perfect tense. Hebrew doesn't have a million tenses the way English does. It really only has two. There's a perfect tense and an imperfect tense. The tense for things that are complete, which is kind of analogous to our past tense, and the tense for things that are ongoing, which is the closest we can get to a present or a future tense. But when we talk about things like that, things like the Messiah coming, we very often use the perfect tense, because that's how confident we are, because it is sure, because it is perfect, because it is so definitely going to happen that it happens. It's the difference between saying, next week I want to go to the store, and next week I go to the store. It's written in the timeline. I go there. I'm going. So the Messiah comes. That's what happens. That's a reality about the present that impacts the future. So what do we do about it? What's all that have to do with the price of rice in China? What does it mean that there are realities about the future, such as the fact that Jesus is creating a new kingdom of everlasting justice and righteousness that will have no end, that should impact what I do in the present? Well, it's not a good answer to give up, to just kind of relax and let somebody else handle it and feel confident that it's all going to work out. Because if I do that, then I miss out on the present, on reality. And reality really is all there is. The present, the moment that I'm living in now, is the only moment I'm ever going to be able to communicate with the future, build a better future, enjoy my life. It doesn't make sense to engage with or worry about beyond what's here and what's knowable and what's engaged with in the present, things that could happen, would happen, should happen, when the present is the place I have the ability to pull triggers. So in the movie, they engage this idea with the topic of global warming. They say the reason the future's upset and they want to unravel history and live backwards or in the past is because their rivers dried up and global warming destroyed them all. And the only way for their generation to survive is to destroy our generation. By destroying our world, we'll create a new one. Meanwhile, the characters in the film, the protagonist and the characters we align with, say every generation looks out for its own interests. We need to protect ourselves, even though the actions we are taking now have import on the future. Everything we do exists to protect reality, and reality happens now. I don't know, just something to think about.
And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, 'twill be